The Lumina arc floated like a crystalline teardrop at the edge of the galaxy, its translucent walls glimmering with the light of distant stars. Inside the station's quantum physics department, Dr. Avon adjusted the final calibrations on what his team affectionately called the quantum ring, a circular platform surrounded by pulsing energy conduits and holographic displays, showing calculations beyond the comprehension of most beings in the Isanar Alliance. "Engaging final sequence," Avon announced, his four-fingered hands moving with practiced precision across the control panel. The slender scientist's skin shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that reflected his excitement, a trait common among his species. This could change everything we know about instantaneous travel. The year was 3247, and the Isanar Alliance, a peaceful coalition of 8 civilized species, had established the Lumina Arc Research Station as their foremost scientific outpost. The alliance had flourished through diplomatic relations and scientific advancement rather than military might, a philosophy that had served them well for centuries. Avon's assistant, Lumi, a small, hovering AI construct shaped like a luminous sphere, chirped with concern. "Doctor, I've detected an anomaly in the translation subroutines. There appears to be a discrepancy in the ancient text sections regarding signal protocols." "Not now, Lumi." Avon waved dismissively, his attention fixed on the shimmering energy beginning to coalesce within the ring. "We're at a critical juncture. The Council expects results after 3 years of funding." The ring began to hum, its tone rising in pitch as energy levels climbed. Around the circular chamber, other scientists, representatives from various Alliance species, watched with anticipation from behind protective barriers. This was to be the culmination of Avon's life's work, a method of instantaneous travel that could eliminate the need for conventional spaceflight. What none of them realized was that a mistranslation in the ancient texts they'd based their work on had altered one crucial parameter. Instead of creating a stable quantum bridge, the ring was broadcasting an emergency distress signal, one specifically coded to summon the most feared warriors in the galaxy, the Deathworlders. The first warning came as a station-wide security alert that blared through the laboratory, causing Avon to jerk back from his console in surprise. "Unidentified vessels approaching at superluminal speeds," announced the station's AI in a calm voice that belied the gravity of the situation. "Defense protocols initiated." Avon exchanged confused glances with his team. "Defense protocols? The Ark barely has defensive capabilities. We're a research station." The holographic displays around the laboratory flickered, then switched to external views. What they showed sent ice through Avon's veins, a rippling tear in space-time, and emerging from it, ships. Not the sleek, elegant vessels of the Isanar Alliance, but massive, angular warships bristling with weapons. Their hulls were scarred and pitted from countless battles, proudly displaying their history of violence. "By the Founders," whispered one of Avon's colleagues, a serpentine Zilthian whose scales had paled to a ghostly white. "Those are Deathworlder vessels." "Impossible," Avon breathed, but the evidence was before his eyes. "They haven't been seen in this sector for generations." Lumi hovered nervously at Avon's shoulder. "Doctor, I believe I've identified the issue. The ring's quantum signature isn't creating a bridge, it's broadcasting. The ancient text wasn't describing a travel method. It was warning about a summoning beacon." Avon's luminescence patterns darkened with horror as understanding dawned. "We've been calling them, like prey animals signaling to predators." The laboratory doors slid open, and Ambassador Mara strode in, her normally composed features tight with concern. As the Isanar Alliance's foremost diplomat, Mara had negotiated countless treaties, but nothing had prepared her for this crisis. "Dr. Avon, I need answers," she demanded, her voice carrying the authority of her position. "Why are we suddenly surrounded by a fleet of the most dangerous species in the galaxy?" Before Avon could respond, Captain Helix of the Ark's small patrol vessel entered behind Mera. Unlike the ambassador's diplomatic finery, Helix wore the simple uniform of the Alliance security force, more ceremonial than functional, as the Alliance had little need for military personnel. "The Deathworlders have established a perimeter around the station," Helix reported, his voice calm despite the circumstances. "They've made no hostile moves yet, but they're not responding to standard greeting protocols." Avon stepped forward, his luminescence patterns showing his distress. "Ambassador, Captain, this is my responsibility. The Quantum Ring Project has accidentally activated an ancient emergency beacon. We were attempting to create instantaneous travel, but the signal we're broadcasting..." He hesitated, then continued. "It appears to be a specific distress call programmed for Deathworlders." Mera's eyes widened. "You're telling me we accidentally called them here?" "Not just called them," Lumi interjected, projecting data into the air between them. "Based on the signal pattern, we've broadcast what their cultures would interpret as a priority emergency summons, the kind that would mobilize their entire fleet." Captain Helix ran a hand through his crest of feathers, a sign of extreme stress among his avian species. "So they think someone is in danger and needs their protection. That complicates matters." "Can we shut it down?" Mera asked, turning to Avon. The scientist shook his head. "Not immediately. The quantum resonance has established itself in subspace. Even if we power down the ring, the echo will continue for hours." A communication alert chimed, and all eyes turned to the main display screen. The face that appeared belonged to a species most in the room had only seen in historical records. Heavy-browed with a jutting jaw, weathered skin covered in scars, and eyes that held the calculating gaze of a predator. A Deathworlder. "This is Captain Corv of the Deathworlder Response Fleet," the being growled, voice like gravel. "We received your emergency summons. Identify the threat." Mera stepped forward immediately, drawing on years of diplomatic training. "Captain Corv, I am Ambassador Mera of the Isinar Alliance. There has been a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding?" Corv's face darkened. "The beacon you activated is ancient and sacred. It is not to be used lightly." "We didn't intend to activate it," Avon interjected, stepping beside Mera. "We were researching quantum transportation and inadvertently triggered the signal due to a mistranslation of ancient texts." Corv's expression shifted from anger to something more complex, perhaps disbelief mixed with contempt. "You triggered a Class 1 military distress beacon. By accident?" "I'm afraid so," Mera said, attempting to salvage the diplomatic situation. "We offer our sincere apologies for the error, and thank you for your prompt response. Now that we've clarified there is no emergency, your fleet is welcome to return to..." "Scans indicate your station has minimal defensive capabilities," Corv interrupted, eyes narrowing. "Yet you are positioned at a strategic point near valuable resources. How convenient that you would accidentally summon protection." Avon felt a chill. The Deathworlder captain wasn't buying their explanation, or worse, was using their mistake as pretext for something else. "Captain, I assure you," Mera began, but the communication cut off abruptly. "They're powering weapons," Helix announced, checking a portable scanner, "and launching boarding craft." "They think we're lying," Avon realized aloud. "They believe we summoned them because we're under threat, and now they're moving to secure the station." "Or they see an opportunity," Helix suggested grimly. "The Ark contains some of our most advanced research. To a militaristic culture, that's valuable plunder." Mera turned to them both, her diplomatic poise giving way to urgency. "We need options. Now." Avon's mind raced. "We need to reverse the signal somehow. Make it clear there's no emergency. But that will take time we don't have." "What about the Theta Empire?" Helix suggested. "They're the only humanoid warrior species with whom we've maintained long-term relations." They might be able to communicate with the Deathworlders in terms they understand. Mara nodded quickly. The Theta outpost is only 2 light-years from here. I'll send an urgent request for intervention. She paused, looking at Avon. Can you modify that ring to send a message to the Theta? Possibly, Avon said, already moving back to his console. The quantum entanglement principles are similar, but I'll need time. Time is what we don't have, Helix said, gesturing to the displays showing Deathworlder vessels moving into attack formation. I'll take the patrol ship and try to buy you as much as I can. That's suicide, Mara protested. Helix offered a grim smile. Not if I don't engage them directly. I'll use evasive maneuvers, emergency protocols, anything to distract them and slow their approach. As Helix departed for his ship, Avon turned to Mara. Ambassador, I need access to the station's main communication array to boost the quantum signal to reach the Theta Empire. You'll have it, she promised. And I'll coordinate evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. If the Deathworlders breach the station, we need to minimize casualties. Outside the laboratory windows, they could see the first flashes of weapons fire as the Deathworlders began their assault. The peaceful research station was about to become a battlefield, and none of them were prepared for war. In the command center of the lead Deathworlder vessel, Captain Korv studied the holographic display of the Lumina Arc with narrowed eyes. Around him, his crew, all hardened warriors from worlds with crushing gravity, extreme temperatures, or deadly atmospheres, prepared for combat. The signal is still active, reported his second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Varex. But their defensive posture is unusual. Explain, Korv demanded, not taking his eyes off the display. They've launched only one patrol vessel, which is executing evasive maneuvers but not attacking. The station itself has activated minimal shielding, and there's an evacuation underway of what appears to be civilians. Korv growled thoughtfully. Curious. Either they are truly unprepared for combat, or this is an elaborate deception. The boarding parties are ready, Varric stated. 3 squads, heavy armament. We can secure their command center within minutes. Proceed, Korv ordered. But remind the warriors, we answer a distress call first. Secure the station. Identify any threats. Protect non-combatants. Plunder is secondary. Varric nodded and departed to relay the orders. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Deathworlders operated by a strict code. A distress beacon was sacred. To ignore one was unthinkable, and to falsely trigger one was an offense that demanded retribution. But something about this situation felt wrong to Korv. The Isinar Alliance was known for scientific advancement, not deception. He returned his attention to the small patrol vessel that darted between his ships, never firing, but always moving, drawing attention and resources. A clever tactic. But to what end? On the bridge of his patrol ship, Captain Helix executed another evasive maneuver as energy blasts from a Deathworlder cruiser passed dangerously close to his hull. His vessel wasn't designed for combat. It was primarily used for escort duties and minor security operations. Against a Deathworlder fleet, it was like a flying target. Shields at 40%, reported his navigation officer, voice strained. We can't take much more of this. We don't need to win, Helix reminded her, banking the ship sharply to avoid another blast. We just need to be annoying enough to keep their attention split. Through the viewports, he could see boarding craft detaching from the larger vessels, heading toward the Lumina Arc. His diversionary tactics weren't enough to stop the invasion entirely. Captain, his communications officer called. I'm receiving a transmission from Ambassador Mara. Put her through, Helix ordered, executing another evasive roll. Mara's face appeared on his display. Captain, Dr. Avon is making progress with the signal modification, but he needs more time. The Deathworlders have breached the outer sections of the Ark. Understood, Helix replied, making a quick decision. We're going to attempt something more direct. Stand by. He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. Set course directly for the lead Deathworlder vessel. Specifically, target their boarding craft launch bays. Sir, his navigation officer questioned, clearly concerned. Not to attack, Helix clarified, but to force them to divert resources to defend their launch capabilities. It's a critical asset they'll prioritize protecting. The patrol ship angled sharply, accelerating toward the massive Deathworlder command vessel. Almost immediately, the enemy ships began to adjust their positions, exactly as Helix had hoped. Back on the Lumina Ark, Dr. Avon worked feverishly at the modified quantum ring controls, Ambassador Mara at his side. They had relocated to the station's main communication center, which offered better access to the Ark's power systems. The quantum signal is realigning, Avon reported, his bioluminescence patterns flickering with concentration. But the original distress beacon is still active in subspace. It's like trying to shout over a siren. Can you cancel it out? Mara asked, dividing her attention between Avon's work and security reports flooding in from around the station. Not directly, but I think I can modify it, change the message. His fingers danced across the controls. Instead of an emergency summons, I can shift it to an all-clear signal. A distant explosion rocked the station, causing them both to brace against the console. Deathworlders have reached level 3, announced the station's AI calmly. Security containment failing. Mara's expression hardened. We need to send that message to the Theta Empire now, even if it's not perfect. Agreed, Avon said, making a final adjustment. Initiating quantum transmission. The modified ring pulsed with energy, creating a shimmering distortion in the air. Unlike the original activation, this pulse was directed, focused on the coordinates of the nearest Theta outpost. Message away, Avon confirmed. Now for the harder part, reconfiguring the original beacon to send the all-clear signal to the Deathworlders. Another explosion, closer this time, shook the room violently. The lights flickered, and several consoles went dark. Power fluctuations detected, the AI announced. Rerouting essential systems. Mara checked her personal communication device. The Deathworlders have secured levels 3 through 5. They're moving methodically, securing each section. Any casualties? Avon asked, not looking up from his work. Minimal so far. They appear to be detaining personnel rather than... She didn't finish the sentence. Small mercy, Avon muttered. I need access to the main power core to boost the signal strength. The control panel here isn't enough. Mara checked the station schematic on her device. The nearest access point is 2 levels down, in an area already occupied by Deathworlders. Their eyes met, the gravity of the situation clear between them. They would have to venture into the occupied zones of the station to reach the power core controls. I'll go, Avon said, standing up from his console. This is my responsibility. Not alone, Mara countered firmly. I have diplomatic credentials. If we're captured, I might be able to negotiate. Avon didn't argue further. Together, they gathered what equipment they could carry and headed for the emergency access tunnels that would take them down to the power core level, leaving Lumi to monitor the quantum signals. As they navigated through the narrow maintenance tunnels, the sounds of the Deathworlder invasion echoed around them. Heavy footsteps, orders barked in harsh voices, the occasional energy discharge. The Lumina Ark, once a sanctuary of scientific discovery, had become a war zone. I never imagined my research could lead to this, Avon said quietly, as they paused at a junction, checking Mara's device for Deathworlder positions. You couldn't have known, Mara replied, her voice gentle despite the tension. The ancient texts have always been difficult to interpret, but I should have been more careful. Lumi warned me about the translation discrepancy, and I ignored it. His bioluminescence patterns darkened with shame. Arrogance. The Council always praised my intuitive approach to research, and I began to believe I couldn't fail. Mara placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll fix this, Doctor, but we need to keep moving. They continued through the tunnels until they reached an access point that would take them to the power core control room. According to Mara's scanner, there were Deathworlders in the vicinity, but not directly in the control room itself. "Ready?" she whispered. Avon nodded, and Mara carefully opened the access panel. They emerged into a corridor just outside the power core control room. The lights were dimmed to emergency levels, casting long shadows. They had taken only a few steps when a deep voice spoke from behind them. "Don't move." They froze, then slowly turned to face a Deathworlder warrior in full combat armor. A weapon trained on them. Up close, the Deathworlder was even more intimidating, standing nearly 2 meters tall, with musculature that spoke of evolution on a high-gravity world. Mara stepped forward slightly, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "I am Ambassador Mara of the Isinar Alliance. We are not combatants." The Deathworlder's expression didn't change. "You're outside the designated containment areas. Explain." "We need to access the power core controls," Avon said, deciding that honesty was their best option. "To correct the signal that summoned your fleet." The warrior studied them for a moment, then touched a communication device on his armor. "Captain Corv, I've intercepted 2 Isinar trying to access their power core. One claims to be an ambassador. The other appears to be technical personnel." After a brief pause, a response came through. "Bring them to me. Secure the power core, but do not disable it." "Understood," the warrior acknowledged, then gestured with his weapon. "You will come with me." "The signal needs to be corrected immediately," Avon protested. "Every moment it continues, it puts more lives at risk." "You will explain that to the captain," the warrior said firmly. "Move." They had no choice but to comply. The Deathworlder escorted them through corridors, where more warriors were systematically securing areas of the station. The Isinar personnel they passed were being held in makeshift containment areas, looking frightened but unharmed. Finally, they were brought to what had been the station's central operations center, now serving as the Deathworlder's command post. Captain Corv stood examining holographic displays of the station layout, his imposing figure dominating the room. He turned as they entered, eyes narrowing as he recognized Mara from their earlier communication. "Ambassador, you've been difficult to locate." "Captain Corv," Mara acknowledged with a diplomatic nod. "I apologize for the confusion surrounding our situation. As we tried to explain earlier, the emergency beacon was activated in error." Corv's gaze shifted to Avon. "And you are?" "Dr. Avon, head of quantum physics. The beacon activation was the result of my experiment." He met the Deathworlder's eyes directly. "Captain, I understand your skepticism, but we are telling the truth. We need to access the power core controls to correct the signal and end this misunderstanding." Corv studied them both for a long moment. "You maintain that your heavily armed fleet was summoned by accident?" His tone made clear how implausible he found this. "We have no heavily armed fleet," Mara pointed out. "The Lumina Arc is a research station with minimal defensive capabilities, as your scans have surely confirmed. The only vessel we dispatched was a single patrol ship." "A patrol ship that has been executing impressive evasive maneuvers," Corv noted. "Your pilot has skill." "Captain Helix is doing his duty to protect the station," Mara replied. "But he has not fired upon your vessels, has he?" This gave Corv pause. "No, he has not." A communication alert sounded, and one of Corv's officers reported, "Captain, we're detecting new quantum distortions. Multiple vessels emerging from subspace." Corv moved swiftly to the tactical display. "Identification?" "Theta Empire warships," the officer replied with surprise. "A rapid response battle group." Mara exchanged a look of relief with Avon. Their message had reached the Theta Empire, and they had responded. "The Theta Empire are our allies," Mara explained to Corv. "We contacted them when your fleet appeared, seeking their assistance in resolving the situation peacefully." Corv's expression darkened. You brought another warrior culture into this conflict? Not to fight, Avon interjected quickly. To mediate. The Theta understand both our scientific focus and your warrior culture. They can verify that we activated the beacon accidentally and help us correct it. Before Corv could respond, another alert sounded. Captain, we're being hailed by the lead Theta vessel. On screen, Corv ordered, his posture tense. The display showed a Theta officer, humanoid like the Deathworlders, but with distinctive ridged features and a ceremonial scar pattern that marked their rank and lineage. Mara recognized General Thale, a senior Theta commander she had met during previous diplomatic missions. Deathworlder vessels. This is General Thale of the Theta Empire, the Theta officer announced, his voice carrying the formal tones of military protocol. We are responding to a distress call from our allies, the Isinar Alliance. Stand down your weapons and prepare for diplomatic resolution. Corv's response was measured but firm. General Thale, I am Captain Corv of the Deathworlder Response Fleet. We are here answering an ancient emergency beacon, one specifically coded for our intervention. This is a matter of honor. Thale nodded in understanding. Honor is respected among the Theta as well, Captain. But I believe there has been a misunderstanding. The Isinar Alliance is a peaceful scientific confederation. They possess no weapons that would threaten your people. They triggered a sacred beacon, Corv insisted. Whether by accident or design, that demands response. And you have responded, Thale acknowledged. Now, let us resolve this without further conflict. I propose a joint verification of the beacon's activation circumstances. Corv considered this for a moment, then turned to Avon. You claim you can modify the beacon signal to send an all-clear? Yes, Avon confirmed, but I need access to the power core controls. After a tense moment, Corv nodded. Very well. You will have your access, but under guard. If this is deception. It is not, Mara assured him. General Thale, we appreciate the Theta Empire's swift response. With your permission, Dr. Avon will now work to correct the beacon signal. Proceed, Thale agreed. We will maintain position to ensure peaceful resolution. With Corv's reluctant approval, Avon was escorted back to the power core control room, accompanied by both Deathworlder guards and Mara. The tension in the station remained high, with Deathworlder troops still occupying much of the facility and the Theta fleet in defensive formation nearby. In the control room, Avon worked quickly to interface the quantum calculations with the station's main power systems. The original distress signal is still resonating in subspace, he explained as he worked. I need to generate a countersignal with precisely inverted quantum signatures, essentially a cancellation wave, followed by the correct all-clear code. The Deathworlder guards watched with suspicious fascination as Avon's fingers danced across the controls, adjusting parameters and power levels. Mara stood nearby, dividing her attention between diplomatic communications with both fleets and monitoring Avon's progress. Power levels at maximum, Avon announced. Initiating countersignal now. The station's lights dimmed momentarily as energy was diverted to the quantum systems. On the displays, they could see the wave pattern of the original distress beacon being met by Avon's countersignal, the two gradually moving into alignment. It's working, Avon said with cautious optimism. The distress signal is destabilizing. One of the Deathworlder guards touched his communication device. Captain, the beacon signal is changing. Our sensors confirm it's shifting to an all-clear pattern. In the operations center, Corv watched the sensor readings with narrowed eyes. The sacred distress beacon that had drawn his fleet across light years was indeed transforming into the equally sacred all-clear signal, one that no Deathworlder would ignore. Confirm authenticity, he ordered his technicians. After tense moments of analysis, one reported, the quantum signature matches ancient patterns. It is authentic. Corv turned to the communication screen where General Thale was still waiting. The beacon signals an all clear. By our laws, we must acknowledge and stand down. Thiel nodded respectfully. A wise decision, Captain. The Theta Empire will guarantee the safety of the Isanar Alliance during this transition. With clear reluctance but bound by his culture's strict code regarding emergency beacons, Korv issued the order. All warriors, return to vessels. The emergency is resolved. We stand down. Throughout the Lumina Arc, Deathworlder troops began a disciplined withdrawal, releasing detained personnel and securing their equipment. The invasion that had begun so suddenly was ending with surprising order. In the power core control room, Avon watched the final confirmation that the countersignal had successfully neutralized the distress beacon. His bioluminescence patterns showed both relief and lingering shame. "It's done," he told Mara quietly. "The beacon is fully neutralized." "Well done, Doctor," she replied, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder. "Now, we begin the diplomatic work of healing this rift." The withdrawal of Deathworlder forces was not without complications. Several sections of the Lumina Arc had sustained damage during the initial assault, and the station's systems were compromised in multiple areas. Emergency repairs were underway, but it would take time to restore the Ark to full functionality. Captain Helix, having survived his daring diversionary tactics, docked his damaged patrol vessel and joined Mara and Avon in the conference room, where representatives from all three factions had gathered. Isanar Alliance personnel, Deathworlder officers led by Captain Korv, and Theta Empire mediators under General Thiel. The atmosphere was tense but no longer hostile. Avon had provided a detailed technical explanation of how the mistranslation had occurred and how the Quantum Ring project had inadvertently triggered the ancient beacon. The Deathworlders, while still suspicious, were beginning to accept that the incident had indeed been an accident rather than a deception. The Isanar Alliance extends its formal apologies for the inadvertent activation of the sacred beacon, Mara stated, her diplomatic training evident in every carefully chosen word. "We recognize the seriousness of this error and are prepared to offer reparations for any inconvenience caused to the Deathworlder fleet." Korv's expression remained stern, but his posture had relaxed slightly. "The Deathworlder response fleet acknowledges your apology. Our laws regarding the sacred beacons are absolute. We must respond to distress and stand down upon all clear. No reparations are necessary for us doing our duty." General Thiel, serving as mediator, nodded approvingly. "The Theta Empire commends both parties for their willingness to resolve this conflict peacefully. However, this incident raises important questions about the security of this region and the protocols for emergency response." "Agreed," Helix said, speaking up for the first time. The Lumina Arc's defensive capabilities proved woefully inadequate. Had this been a genuine attack, rather than a misunderstanding, the station would have fallen within minutes. This blunt assessment caused murmurs among the Isanar representatives. The Alliance had long prioritized scientific advancement over military strength, a philosophy that had served them well in peaceful regions but had left them vulnerable at the galaxy's edge. "Captain Helix raises a valid point," Mara acknowledged. "Perhaps it is time for the Alliance to reconsider its security protocols, especially for outposts in less stable regions. The Deathworlders could provide assistance in this matter," Korv offered unexpectedly. "In exchange for access to your quantum communication technology." All eyes turned to the Deathworlder captain in surprise. "You're proposing a technology exchange?" Mara asked carefully. Korv nodded. "Your scientists clearly possess advanced knowledge that could benefit our communication networks. In return, we can offer defensive systems and training that would better secure your outposts." "An intriguing proposal," General Thiel commented. "The Theta Empire would be willing to facilitate such an exchange, ensuring fair terms for all parties." Avon, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "Before we proceed with any technology exchange, I believe we must address the root of this misunderstanding, the ancient texts that led to our error. Explain, Corv prompted. The beacon technology appears in multiple ancient civilizations' records, Avon elaborated. But translations vary widely, and our understanding is clearly incomplete. I propose a joint research initiative, combining Isinar linguistic expertise, Deathworlder historical knowledge of the beacons, and Theta archaeological resources. The proposal sparked interest among all parties. A three-way collaboration would not only prevent future misunderstandings, but could potentially unlock technological advances beneficial to all. A sound suggestion, Thiel agreed. Knowledge shared is knowledge secured. The Deathworlders will participate, Corv stated after brief consideration. Our archives contain sacred texts regarding the beacons that have never been shared with outsiders. Perhaps it is time to reconsider that policy. Mara smiled diplomatically. Then we have the beginning of an agreement. The Alliance Council will need to approve formal terms, but I am authorized to initiate preliminary discussions. As the negotiations continued, Avon found himself drawn into technical discussions with Deathworlder scientists who had accompanied the fleet. Despite their fearsome appearance and military bearing, they showed keen scientific insight and a surprising reverence for knowledge. Your quantum ring technology is impressive, commented one Deathworlder scientist, examining the schematics Avon had provided. Though its application was unfortunate. A painful lesson in thorough translation and testing, Avon admitted, but perhaps one that will lead to greater understanding between our peoples. As the day progressed, the atmosphere in the conference room gradually shifted from cautious diplomacy to genuine collaboration. The Theta representatives, familiar with both cultures, skillfully bridged communications gaps and clarified misunderstandings before they could escalate. By the time the formal meetings concluded, a framework had been established. The Isinar Alliance would share quantum communication technology. The Deathworlders would provide defensive systems and training, and the Theta Empire would contribute diplomatic support and archaeological resources to the joint research initiative. All three factions would benefit, and the mistake that had brought them together might ultimately forge a lasting alliance. As the Deathworlder and Theta representatives prepared to return to their vessels, Captain Corv approached Avon and Mara privately. Your honesty today has earned respect, the Deathworlder stated gruffly. Few would admit to such an error so openly. Truth is valued in the Alliance, Mara replied, as is the opportunity to learn from mistakes. Corv nodded, then fixed his gaze on Avon. Your quantum ring. Its intended purpose was transportation, yes? Instantaneous travel through quantum entanglement, Avon confirmed. Though clearly, we have much more to learn before such technology is viable. When you resume that research, Corv said, the Deathworlders would be interested in collaborating. Our worlds are far from major travel routes. Such technology would be valuable to us. With that unexpected offer hanging in the air, Corv departed, leaving Avon and Mara to consider the strange turn of events that had transformed a potential catastrophe into an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. In the days that followed, the Lumina Ark gradually returned to normal operations. Repair teams worked to restore damaged sections, while Avon and his team carefully dismantled the quantum ring for thorough review and redesign. The Deathworlder fleet maintained a reduced presence in the system, ostensibly to provide security during repairs, but also to begin the promised technology exchange. One evening, as Avon worked late in his laboratory, Ambassador Mara visited him. She found the scientist meticulously analyzing the ancient texts that had led to their near disaster. Still working, Doctor? She asked, settling into a chair beside his desk. Avon's bioluminescence patterns showed mild embarrassment. I can't seem to stop thinking about how close we came to catastrophe. One mistranslated phrase, one ignored warning. Yet, here we are, Mara pointed out. forming unprecedented alliances with both the Deathworlders and strengthening our ties with the Theta Empire. Sometimes, the most significant diplomatic breakthroughs come from the most unexpected circumstances. A generous view of my error, Avon said with a small smile. Not just generous, realistic, Mara insisted. The Alliance Council is thoroughly impressed with the outcome. 3 cultures that might never have found common ground are now engaged in meaningful exchange. Avon set aside the text he'd been studying. Have you ever wondered why those ancient beacons were created in the first place? What threat was so great that it required summoning warriors from across the galaxy? The Joint Research Initiative may eventually answer that question, Mara said. But perhaps the beacons themselves were less about specific threats and more about the principle that even vastly different civilizations might come to each other's aid in times of need. A principle we've now reinvented, Avon observed thoughtfully. Their conversation was interrupted by Lumi, who hovered into the laboratory with an urgent chirp. Doctor, Ambassador, Captain Helix requests your presence in the observation deck immediately. There's something you need to see. They hurried to the observation deck, a large chamber with transparent walls, offering a panoramic view of space around the station. Helix was waiting for them, along with several other station personnel. What's happening? Mara asked as they entered. Helix gestured toward the viewport. The Deathworlders are conducting what they call a honor display. Apparently, it's customary when forming new alliances. Outside, the Deathworlder vessels were executing precise, coordinated maneuvers, complex patterns that demonstrated both their ship's capabilities and their crew's skill. Energy trails followed each ship, creating luminous designs against the backdrop of stars. It's beautiful, Avon murmured, watching the deadly warships transformed into artists, painting with light across the canvas of space. And highly symbolic, added a voice from behind them. They turned to find General Thiel entering the observation deck. The patterns they're creating represent protection, alliance, and shared purpose. It's a rare honor, one the Theta Empire received only after decades of diplomatic relations. Yet they offer it to us after days, Mara noted with surprise. Thiel's expression was thoughtful. Captain Korv is an interesting leader, traditional in many ways, yet progressive in others. I believe he sees potential in this alliance that goes beyond immediate benefits. As they watched the display continue, Avon reflected on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. His quantum research, intended to bridge physical distance, had instead bridged cultural divides. A mistake that could have led to destruction had instead opened pathways to cooperation. The final pattern created by the Deathworlder ships formed a perfect replica of the quantum ring's energy signature, not the distress beacon that had summoned them, but the theoretical transportation matrix that had been Avon's original goal. A message, Thiel observed. They're telling you to continue your research, but this time, with allies. Avon's bioluminescence patterns brightened with renewed purpose. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with cultural barriers to overcome and technological hurdles to surmount. But for the first time, the Isanar Alliance would not be facing the unknown alone. They had found unexpected strength in those they had once feared, the Deathworlders who had answered their accidental call. As the honor display concluded and the Deathworlder ships returned to their positions, Avon made a silent promise to himself. The next time he activated the quantum ring, it would not be an accident or a mistake. It would be the culmination of true collaboration between vastly different cultures, united by the pursuit of knowledge, and the unexpected bonds formed when worlds collide. The station's comms buzzed with an incoming transmission from Captain Korv. Impressive, isn't it? The Deathworlder asked, noting their odd expressions. Our ships are designed for war, but in the right hands, even weapons can create beauty. A powerful demonstration, Mara acknowledged. The Alliance is honored by this display. Honor is earned, Korv replied simply. Your truthfulness in the face of error, your willingness to correct mistakes. These are values the Deathworlders respect. We have much to learn from each other, Avon said. Corv nodded. Which brings me to my purpose in contacting you. My superiors have reviewed the preliminary agreements and approved expanded cooperation. They are particularly interested in your quantum research. Dr. Avon. I would welcome Deathworlder insights, Avon replied honestly. Your understanding of the ancient beacons clearly exceeds our own. More than that, Corv continued. They have authorized me to share something few outsiders have seen. The Ancestral Codex, which contains the original specifications for the beacon network. This announcement caused a stir among everyone present. The Ancestral Codex was mentioned in historical records, but was generally considered a closely guarded secret of Deathworlder culture. That's unprecedented, General Thale stated, clearly surprised. Times change, Corv said simply. The incident with the Lumina Arc has proven that isolation of knowledge can lead to danger. Better to share understanding than risk further accidental summonings. The slight humor in his tone wasn't lost on the others, and even Avon managed to smile at his own expense. When can we begin examining the Codex? He asked eagerly. A secure copy will be transferred to the Ark tomorrow, Corv informed them. Under joint supervision, of course. My scientists are preparing annotations to assist with translation. The Alliance Council will want to reciprocate this gesture of trust, Mara said thoughtfully. I believe I can authorize access to our complete quantum entanglement research archives. A fair exchange, Corv agreed. And General Thale, the Theta Empire's archaeological expertise would be valuable in contextualizing the older sections of the Codex. Thale inclined his head. We would be honored to contribute. Our archaeolinguistic teams have experience with several extinct languages that share roots with ancient Deathworlder dialects. As the conversation continued, mapping out the practical details of their unprecedented collaboration, Avon found himself drawn back to the viewport. The Deathworlder vessels, now returned to their standard formation, no longer appeared threatening to him. Instead, he saw them as they truly were, the products of a culture that had evolved in harsh conditions, developing strength not for conquest, but for survival. Perhaps that was the most valuable lesson from this entire incident, that appearances and reputations could be misleading, that fear often stemmed from misunderstanding, and that even the most fearsome warriors could become allies when approached with honesty and respect. Later that night, after the meetings had concluded and the station had quieted for the night cycle, Avon returned to his laboratory. The disassembled components of the quantum ring lay spread across several workbenches, waiting to be redesigned with new understanding. Lumi hovered nearby, projecting holographic simulations based on the day's discussions with the Deathworlder scientists. Their approach to quantum mechanics is fascinating, the AI commented. More intuitive than theoretical, but remarkably effective. They evolved on worlds that demanded practical solutions, Avon replied, examining one of the simulations. Theory is a luxury when survival is at stake. Yet they value knowledge for its own sake, Lumi noted. Their scientists showed genuine excitement about collaborative research. Avon nodded, making adjustments to the simulation. Every culture has its complexities, its contradictions. We've been guilty of oversimplification, seeing the Deathworlders only as warriors, while they saw us only as defenseless scholars, Lumi added. Both perspectives contain truth, but miss the whole. This observation gave Avon pause. Perhaps that's the real purpose of the Beacon Network, not just to summon help in emergencies, but to force different cultures to interact, to move beyond simplistic views of each other. An interesting theory, came Ambassador Mara's voice as she entered the laboratory. And one that might have merit. The ancient civilizations that created the beacons were facing extinction-level threats. Perhaps they understood that survival ultimately depends on cooperation, not isolation. Ambassador, Avon greeted her with surprise. I thought you'd retired for the night. Too much on my mind, she admitted, moving to examine the simulations. The Alliance Council is understandably concerned about the implications of our new agreements. Not everyone shares our optimistic view of Deathworlder intentions. Politics, Avon sighed. Always more complicated than physics. Mara smiled. Both involve forces in tension, seeking equilibrium. But yes, council politics can be particularly challenging. Some representatives fear we're compromising our pacifist principles by engaging with warrior cultures. We're not becoming warriors ourselves, Avon pointed out. We're learning to coexist with them, to understand their perspective. Surely that aligns with Alliance principles of diversity and cooperation. I made much the same argument, Mara agreed. And the majority of the Council agrees, especially after seeing the positive outcomes of this crisis. But change is never easy, particularly for a civilization that has defined itself in opposition to militarism for generations. Avon considered this as he continued adjusting the simulation. Perhaps we need to reframe our understanding. The Deathworlders aren't militaristic by choice. They evolved on planets that demanded strength and fighting prowess just to survive. Their warrior culture is as much an adaptation as our focus on science and diplomacy. An insightful perspective, Mara commented. One that might help bridge the cultural gap as we move forward. She paused, watching the simulation take new form under Avon's guidance. What are you working on so late? Integrating Deathworlder quantum concepts with our own, he explained. Their approach is surprisingly complementary to ours. Where we focus on theoretical precision, they emphasize robust application under varying conditions. Exactly what we need for practical transportation technology. The simulation crystallized into a new configuration, a modified quantum ring design that incorporated elements of both approaches. The energy patterns were more stable, the quantum signatures clearer. Will it work? Mara asked, studying the holographic model. In theory, yes, Avon replied. But theory isn't enough anymore. We'll need extensive testing, careful translation of all parameters, and thorough safety protocols before activation. He smiled ruefully. I've learned my lesson about rushing into quantum experiments. A valuable lesson for us all, Mara agreed, and one that may ultimately benefit the entire Alliance. As they continued discussing the project, neither noticed the small alert that briefly flashed on one of the laboratory monitors. A quantum echo, faint but distinct, emanating from deep space. The original distress beacon, though neutralized within the local system, had propagated further than anyone had realized. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, something else had received the signal, something ancient, something that remembered the true purpose of the beacon network and the threat it had been designed to combat, something that was now stirring after millennia of dormancy. But that was a challenge for another day. For now, the Lumina Arc had found unexpected allies in a time of need, transforming potential disaster into opportunity. The Isanar Alliance was evolving, growing beyond its self-imposed limitations to engage with the broader galactic community. And Dr. Avon, whose mistake had catalyzed this transformation, was at the forefront of a new era of collaboration between cultures that had once regarded each other with fear and suspicion. As dawn broke over the distant star that provided light to the Lumina Arc, representatives from all three factions gathered in the newly repaired conference room to formalize their agreements. The Ancestral Codex, contained in a ceremonial case carried by Deathworlder guards, was presented with solemn ritual. In return, Ambassador Mara provided complete access to the Alliance's quantum research archives, while General Thale committed Theta archaeological resources to the joint initiative. This day marks not an ending, but a beginning, Mara stated as the formal documents were signed. A beginning of understanding, cooperation, and mutual respect between cultures that might never have found common ground without the, unique circumstances that brought us together. Captain Corv, representing the Deathworlders, nodded in agreement. From a mistaken summons comes true alliance. Perhaps this was the will of the ancestors all along. General Thiel raised a ceremonial cup in the Theta tradition of sealing important agreements. To unexpected journeys and the wisdom they bring. As the others joined in the toast, Dr. Avon reflected on the strange path that had led them here. A translation error, a misunderstood signal, a peaceful station suddenly at war, all culminating in a historic alliance that might change the course of galactic relations for generations to come. In science, mistakes were often the gateway to discovery. Perhaps the same was true in diplomacy, in cultural exchange, in the complex dance of civilizations learning to coexist despite their differences. The quantum ring had failed in its intended purpose, but had succeeded in ways no one could have predicted. And as the ceremony concluded, and the real work of collaboration began, Avon knew that the greatest discoveries still lay ahead, not just in quantum physics, but in the uncharted territories of cross-cultural understanding and cooperation. The accidental summoning of the Deathworlders had been merely the first step on a journey that would take them all far beyond the boundaries of the known. The Lumina Arc, once a solitary outpost at the edge of Alliance space, now stood as a beacon of a different kind, a symbol of unity forged in crisis, of strength found in diversity, and of the unexpected alliances that could emerge when different worlds collided.